Hi, this is Politics by Jake. This is your reporter, your commentator, and advisor, Jake, speaking from Los Angeles, the city of angels. And each week, we bring a strategic briefing, an overview of world-shaping events, a map of the forces driving history and the moves that matter. And the aim is simple: to help those, wherever they stand, add weight to the right side of history, to reveal not only what's happening, but why, and what it means for those determined to act. This is Politics by Jake. And I want to start with what a lot of you must think is my favorite topic. It really isn't. It's quite the opposite. It's just that I and my fellow journalists are voices of warning, and I really have no choice except to continue, while I am allowed to do so anyway, to raise this voice of warning. So, okay, Donald Trump. We have this, and I'm not above this, including other sources besides myself. I talk a lot, and I do a lot of shows where I don't include any other sources besides myself. But when I hear something that says it well, I go ahead and at least use it as a springboard and an opener for what it is that I'm going to talk about. And there's this great recitation by Keith Olbermann, one of his recent shows, and I think what I'll do is I'll include it here in his words because he says this so well. And then I'll come back and comment. Here it is.
Breaking news. Donald Trump does not own the White House. Donald Trump does not own the United States of America. Donald Trump does not own the world. Nothing Trump has done in sending in thugs and military to attack people that did not vote for him in cities and states that do not support him is legal. Nothing Trump has done in having his Nosferatu, Stephen Miller, threaten Governor Pritzker of Illinois with seditious conspiracy is legal. Nothing Trump has done in his attempt to begin ethnic cleansing of Hispanics in this country, Gestapo-like raids, kidnappings, deportations, is legal. Nothing Trump has done in sending so-called election monitors to interfere in the voting in California and Jersey on behalf of the MAGA is legal. Nothing Trump has done to enable the passive self-neutering of the House and Senate is legal. Nothing Trump has done to let him say, supposedly jokingly, per the New York Times yesterday, "I'm the speaker and the president," is legal. Nothing Trump has done in his demolition against, destruction of, attack on the East Wing of the White House is legal. Nothing Trump has done in murdering citizens of other nations in international waters without evidence and without a declaration of war, without any congressional oversight, none of that is legal. Nothing he has done to send battleships to Latin America is legal. Nothing he has done to accept money from international sources for himself and his family is legal. Nothing he has done to try to buy the election for the fascist Milei in Argentina is legal. Nothing Trump has done in selling $130 million worth of influence in the army to someone aptly described as a weirdo Nepo baby is legal. Almost nothing about the Trump administration, about his presidency, about his forming unilateral dictatorship is legal, and thus it is time to cut him off.
Okay, so Olbermann here makes really, it's an important statement, and it's really even a profound statement, and in the lethargy and the non-government and the helplessness, or the profound helplessness that seems to permeate society right now in the United States, this is a profound statement. He says almost nothing that Trump does is legal. And then he goes on to elaborate. And this is quite a statement. And what I wanted to do is go into that. And explain to you why Olbermann made that statement and to see if that sweeping accusation is actually true or not. So let's go through the things that he does. Number one, let's look at this. Deploying thugs and military, or read ICE Gestapo, because that's what they are. I've told you before, I have a history. I have a certain history in my employment and in my career. I was a a correctional officer. I was a police officer. And I was in the legal profession for a long time. And now I'm a business advisor. And obviously, I'm doing this show as well. I've seen many people try to make a police force, and they weren't able to do it because they weren't acceptable in some way. I submit to you that it is these people who have found a home in what I refer to as the ICE Gestapo. And it is because of this, partly, and their willingness. I mean, these are guys who, as I once joked, these are guys who pleasure themselves while watching Roadhouse. These are guys who they have violence problems. They have similar problems, and they're undisciplined, and they're problems. So these are the guys who are in ICE, and they're willing to do these things because they're like Trump. They have a lot of anger inside them, and they want to vent this, and they see ICE as the opportunity, or I should say, pardon me, ICE Gestapo, as the opportunity for them to vent their spleen. And I always use the example, and it's a great example, of the great movie Stripes with Bill Murray, a bunch of other fine actors. John Candy is in it. There's a bunch of other guys in it. And there's a scene where they are in the barracks just before they start their basic training. And the sergeant is there. The character's named Sergeant Hulka, very funny. And he's having them all introduce themselves. And there's this one guy who introduces himself, and his name is Francis. And you can see by listening to Francis that he's a kind of an over-the-top individual, paranoid, a lot of anger, kind of a dangerous and unpleasant person. And at one point, the Bill Murray character calls him Psycho. And Francis, or Psycho, says, "Okay, pal, you just made the list." And so we get the idea that Francis is Psycho. And we have a wonderful scene in the armory later in the film where the Sergeant Hulka, has been taken into what at that time was communist held territory, and the platoon is going to, or the squadron is going to go in after him, and they're arming up. And somebody walks up to Psycho, or Francis, and says, "So, how do you feel about this?" And you can see that Psycho is very engaged, and he's fitting out his weapon and loading it up, and he says this: "All I can tell you is that finally I'm going to get to kill somebody." These are the guys in ICE Gestapo. Okay? So, that having said, the issue of deploying thugs and military against domestic opponents, there's constitutional limits. The Posse Comitatus Act, which is 18 U.S.C. Section 1385, it bars use of the Army or Air Force for domestic law enforcement. You can't do it, except where Congress authorizes it, and they haven't authorized it. The courts have read in a kind of an exception that they can be used to guard federal buildings. But that doesn't include anything else, and they are being used for other things. And all this, of course, is performative because Trump and his illegitimate cabal, his illegitimate presidency, and his illegitimate and illegal and unconstitutional cabal are heading towards something. They're heading towards prescribing or severely limiting the elections in 2026. And we've talked about that. So, okay. And there's a civil rights overlay to this. Using forces to target political opponents violates the First Amendment, which is political expression and assembly. And we have that happening in the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. We have terrible things going on with regard to that. People are being attacked all over the place. One of the most recent was Reverend David Black, the Presbyterian pastor, stood in front of the Broadview ICE facility in suburban Chicago. He says he was praying wearing clerical garb and a collar when agents on a roof fired pepper balls, which is a pepper ball is a chemical irritant projectile, and tear gas chemical rounds downward. Video footage shows him being struck in the head and rendered momentarily incapacitated while he was praying. In addition to Reverend Black, other clergy and faith-based protesters claimed similar treatment at this facility: pepper bullets, tear gas canisters, and a federal judge actually responded by issuing a temporary restraining order, and this was on October 9th, just this past October 9th, placing limits on the use of riot control weapons by agents against religious protesters who are not posing an immediate threat. So, and this all goes to my saying of what is legal and what is not illegal. Why this matters is there's the religious freedom dimension. A man in full clergy garb, okay, saying, I am praying, or who's in the obvious attitude of praying, was struck with chemical projectiles. This brings in First Amendment, Religious Freedom Restoration Act questions. The agents used chemical weapons against peaceful protesters. The use of tear gas and pepper balls aimed at nonviolent demonstrators raises questions of proportionality, oversight, and state power. And the footage of a pastor, for God's sakes, hit while praying is emotionally strong. The court's restraining order serves as a reference point. The judge says the use of riot control weapons in these conditions may violate the right to protest. Okay, so basically you get the idea on this. The next we have threatening a governor with seditious conspiracy. And this is Governor Pritzker. And this is a misuse of authority. And we talked about Stephen Miller a couple of shows ago and how he wants there to be plenary. And we described plenary as absolute power in the presidency. This is a violation of 18 U.S.C. 2384. It defines seditious conspiracy, having a federal official invoke it as a threat to coerce state behavior could be an abuse of power, obstruction of justice, that's 18 U.S.C. 1505, or extortion, 18 U.S.C. 872. Ethnic cleansing raids, kidnappings, deportations that are going on. There are due process protections under the Fifth Amendment that people have. There are asylum statutes. 8 U.S.C. 1158 is one of them. There's international law. There's the Genocide Convention, Article 2 of that, and the UN Convention Against Torture. They both prohibit mass removals or detention based on ethnicity. See, they don't care anything about this. As I've explained to you again, they don't care about any of this stuff at all. While they were out of power, and actually I think before Trump, they were gaming all of these things. These are the things that they have always wanted to do. And they finally found the flunky, the doofus, and as I'm referring to Donald Trump, who will do all of these things because he's an antinomian. Antinomian is someone who believes that the law applies to you and me, but not to him. They themselves are cowards. And they would not do these things because they're too fearful. But in Trump, they have found the perfect sucker, and he is a sucker. He spent his life fleecing suckers, but he himself is a sucker, and he's being used. And there are worse coming after him. So anyway, so they're doing all of these things in order to see how far they can get with them before the fact, because courts move slowly, and they can commit all of these crimes under color of authority, and it will be months/years and maybe a decade or more before these things come to the court and there is a judicial finding of fact and conclusion. And at this point, let's take a break. This is Politics by Jake, and we will be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And we're talking about the things that Trump are doing which are illegal, which is a sweeping statement that Keith Olbermann made, and I was listening to it, and I thought, gosh, I want to talk about that. So that's what we're talking about. So we just talked about threatening a governor, and that would be Governor Pritzker of Illinois, with seditious conspiracy. Now, let's move on. We talked about ethnic cleansing, raids, kidnappings, deportations. We talked about how that's illegal. Almost, you could argue, 6 ways from Sunday. Sending election monitors to interfere in state voting, that's another thing. That's a violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 594 because it constitutes the intimidation of voters. It's a violation of 52 U.S.C. Section 10307, which is the Voting Rights Act, which bars coercion or interference by federal agents. And it's also federalism. States run their own elections. That's Article 1, Section 4. The states run their own elections. Federal interference without statutory authority is something called ultra vires. Ultra vires is Latin. It basically means it's the other man. It's beyond the president's power. If something is ultra vires to you, it means you don't have the power to do it. It's beyond your power. So when you say ultra vires with regard to sending in election monitors, that's ultra vires. The president doesn't have the power to do that. Obviously, Stephen Miller and others like him would love for the president to be able to exercise plenary power. And the president himself regrets, and I use the term in the loosest sense because Donald Trump is illegitimate. His presidency is unconstitutional. 14th Amendment, Section 3. So, okay, you have the, moving on, you have the passive self-neutering of Congress. This is not a crime per se, but it's a separation of powers breach if it's caused by coercion or bribery. And that's the justification for that is 18 U.S.C. Section 201. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 6 and Section 7, preserves independent legislative authority. Executive manipulation of that process can trigger impeachment. What did Trump just do recently? I wonder how MAGA Mike Johnson feels about this. Claimed to be the Speaker and the President simultaneously. The incompatibility clause of Article 1, Section 6, Clause 2, and Article 2 bar one person from holding both offices, even as a joke. Any official act under such a claim would be void from the beginning. And yet, of course, and again, I say, and I must stress, Trump is a doofus. He's a dummy. He doesn't know any of these things. He's being used by people like Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and Kristi Noem and all the rest, because it is they that want to do these things. And which is why I say that as bad as Donald Trump is, the ones who are coming behind him, and I just named several of them to you, they're the ones who are even more dangerous. So moving on. You have the demolition of the East Wing, the destruction of government property. The White House is government property. It doesn't belong to Donald Trump. It doesn't belong to the executive branch. It's government property. It belongs to the people. 18 U.S.C. Section 1361. It would take an act of Congress to allow a historic building like the White House to be demolished in that way. And of course you don't have it because Congress is not in session. Well, the Senate is in session, but MAGA Mike Johnson, who is merely a lackey and a lickspittle, and I do not blanch or hesitate to use those pejorative terms, is holding the House from session in order to serve Donald Trump. He is a lickspittle. It's a shame. It's an embarrassment and an eternal embarrassment to him. But that's what he is, and that's what's happening. I wonder how he feels to know that Trump has no respect for him as the Speaker of the House. The obvious implication is that he speaks to Mike Johnson and Mike Johnson obeys. Therefore, by derivation, Trump is the Speaker of the House. What an embarrassment. But these people are in thrall to Donald Trump. They are so afraid of him, or they are so doctrinally attached to him that they will allow all of these things to happen. Okay, now we have the killing of foreign nationals in international waters, with a bunch of fishing boats are being blown up. This, without a declaration of war or a war powers resolution notification to Congress, targeted killings like this could violate both 50 U.S.C. 1541 and international humanitarian law. For the due process aspect of this, see Hamden versus Rumsfeld, which is a 2006 case, and Al-Awlaki versus Panetta in 2014. So, sending battleships to Latin America. The president is the commander-in-chief, Article 2, Section 2, but prolonged deployments that risk hostilities require congressional notice under the War Powers Resolution. Ignoring that would be unlawful. Let's talk about the fact that he routinely, since his first administration, routinely has accepted foreign money for himself or his family. This is a violation of the Emoluments Clause, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8, and Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7. This bars, both of these, bar federal officials from receiving foreign or domestic emoluments without congressional consent. It's a violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. That's 15 U.S.C. Section 78 DD-1 et sec. Bribery, 18 U.S.C. Section 201. And it's also wire fraud, 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Let's talk about him financing a foreign election, the fascist Milei in Argentina. This violates the Neutrality Act, 18 U.S.C. Section 960. This could be treated as an unlawful foreign interference under the Logan Act, 18 U.S.C. Section 953. Let's talk about selling military influence for $130 million. Defense production laws, 41 U.S.C. Section 2102, bribery, conflict of interest statutes, 18 U.S.C. Sections 201 to 208, prohibit the sale of contracts or influence. And like I say, you have this child man, this wounded person who is doing all this, and he doesn't know any of this. He doesn't know any of it. He is being used. And once again, like I said just a couple of minutes ago, this is why you have to watch out for the people who are behind him, because they will be coming after him. They are younger, and they are watching everything that is going on, and they will be more dangerous. Okay, let's finish this segment up. It's actually a two-segment thing. Forming unilateral dictatorship, there's no single statute. But the whole framework, the Constitution's separation of power, the Oath Clause, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 8, and 18 U.S.C. Section 2385, which is with regard to advocating the overthrow of the government, which he has done. That's what January 6th, that's why January 6th, 2021 will ever after be known as Insurrection Day, because that's what he did. And that makes any such concentration of unchecked power inherently unlawful. So in short, every act that Keith lists in that clip that I started the show out with maps to a specific red line, either constitutional, statutory, or treaty-based. The thread running through all of them is abuse of power under color of office. And of course, this is all impeachable offense. The framers anticipated this because they had the benefit of history up to the time when they were writing. That's why impeachment exists. And that's why no man is above the law. This isn't just a slogan. It's a structural principle. And at this point, let's take another break, and we will be right back. This is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Okay, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. All right. And so through it all, Trump continues. Trump's own justification statement with regard to what I spent the last 20 minutes or so talking about is this. Listen to how profound it is. Article 2 says I can do whatever I want. Do you hear the child man? Do you hear the 5-year-old? So, what about the White House? Trump just demolished the East Wing. What about that? That's illegal. Here's how it shakes out. The White House is protected under the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. It's 54 U.S.C. Section 3101. Any alteration, demolition, or significant modification to a structure listed or eligible for listing, and the White House, whether the White House is listed in that statute or not, I did not look up. but it's certainly eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, which, if the White House isn't, it obviously should be, and that's a slam dunk. Must go through review by the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. Federal agencies are required to consult before doing anything that might adversely affect the property. Blowing through that would be a direct violation of federal preservation law. And of course, he did it. Now, I talked about this being the people's house. This isn't just a nickname. The White House is owned, as I said, by the United States government. It's managed by the National Park Service. It's maintained with taxpayer funds under 3 U.S.C. Section 110 and any related appropriations. In plain English, the president resides there. He doesn't own it. Destroying or altering it without authorization would be destruction of federal property. 18 U.S.C. Section 1361, a felony, arguably a breach of fiduciary duty to the public trust, and once again, an impeachable offense, and impeachable to anybody who held his coat while he did it. Let's talk about the aspect of congressional control. Major renovations or structural changes require specific appropriations by Congress. Even routine refurbishing is reviewed by the Committee for the Preservation of the White House. This includes the curator, the National Park Service, and representatives from the Smithsonian. When Truman renovated the White House in 1948, Congress had to formally approve and fund it. Anything resembling demolition without similar authorization would be blatantly illegal and a constitutional affront, an executive usurpation of legislative control over federal property and spending. And of course, what does Trump say? Oh, well, it's not unconstitutional because I'm using private money. Do you understand why I call this guy a doofus? Do you understand why people call him a moron? Because he has no concept of any of this. He's just a child man king. That's all he is. And anyway, moving on. I've said that several times already. So in other words, the demolition of the East Wing is vandalism. It is vandalism, and it's not just vandalism. It's actually the proverbial trifecta. You know what a trifecta is, right? So you go to the horse races, you pick 3 horses to finish first, second, and third in a particular order, and if you win a certain amount of money. That's called a trifecta. That's a trifecta of crimes. Number 1, it's historic desecration. It's, number 2, destruction of federal property. Number 3, it's expenditure without congressional approval. And number 4, it's a moral obscenity against the idea of custodianship over the nation's symbolic home. And with Trump, this is all systemic. Trump is a sick person. This is all inside him. He's been sick ever since he was 5 years old. That's what his niece Mary, a board-certified psychologist, says. That's what Bandy X. Lee, a board-certified psychiatrist, go see her at worldmentalhealth.org. That's what thousands of mental health providers say. That's what Dr. Lawrence Razak, a board-certified psychiatrist who clips we have recently featured on this show. That's what he says. Basically, Trump has suffered, without going into it, we could. Well, actually, let's go into it. Basically, Trump suffered a core wound when he was about 5. The basic story is he realized that Daddy and Mommy didn't love him and that they never would love him. Now, let's talk about what Mary Trump says. Mary Trump, in her book, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man, she argues that Donald Trump's personality and worldview were deeply shaped by childhood trauma. A domineering father, that would be Fred Sr., a mother distracted or ill, emotional neglect, the family dynamics of humiliation and competition. She writes that from a very young age, Trump learned that he had to be the strong one, the winner, because he couldn't rely on being loved or held. For example, she says, by limiting Donald's access to his own feelings, his father perverted his son's perception of the world and damaged his ability to live in it. Mary says, moreover, that Trump's core wound is that he's never been loved, only used. And that would trace back to early childhood. She suggests that his younger childhood needs were not met, and that his mother's illness and his father's emotional absence all created a void. She notes that during the most critical developmental years, and that's, as I said, at age 2 to 5, the mother was incapacitated by surgery or illness. And the father was emotionally unavailable, and was a kind of a grand parental figure. So Trump's needs for mirroring and soothing were not met. She connects that to his lifelong lack of empathy, his hostility, his drive for validation. This is why you have these reports of aberrant behavior in Trump from an early age. You have the rocks at a playpen incident. Maggie Haberman of the New York Times reports that neighbors recalled a 5-year-old Donald Trump throwing rocks at a baby's crib in Queens. He tried to throw a cadet out a second-floor window at New York Military Academy, and he would have if 2 students hadn't intervened. There's actually kind of anecdotal information on this that there may have been a situation where Trump's father stated that a judge stated that Trump was either going to reform school because he was, as the father said, a lost child, or he had to go to military academy, and so that's why that happened. Trump said, with regard to women, grab him by the pussy. He mocked a reporter's disability. He said, knock the crap out of them. I'll pay legal fees. This was at one of his rallies when there were some protesters there. He shoved past Montenegro's prime minister. Unbelievable. Do you doubt why I call him a doofus and a moron? I'm sorry. That just made me laugh. He shoved past Montenegro's prime minister at a NATO photo op. This is a widely circulated clip. I mean, this happened. He's done the same thing. He's walked in front of the Queen. He's walked in front of King Charles. He walked in front of the Queen in his first iteration as in the executive office. He walked in front of the King of England in his second iteration. In other words, doofus. He talked about prisoners, United States prisoners of war. He says, I don't like people. He said, I like people who weren't captured. He attacked a Gold Star family, which was Khizr and Ghazala Khan, after a DNC speech. He called fallen service members suckers and losers. This occurred when he was over in Normandy for the annual celebration. He attacked Judge Gonzalo Curiel's Mexican heritage while litigating Trump University, calling it an absolute conflict. There's the story of the Central Park 5 death penalty ads, saying bring back the death penalty, aiming at the 5 teens who were accused. These teens were later exonerated. He threw lunch against, this is all documented, by the way. Call the show if you have any questions. I've got the documentation on all of this stuff. He threw lunch against the wall in the White House. Dishes, tableware incidents after Barr, his former attorney general, contradicted his fraud claims. And at this point, let's take a break for some more messages. This is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. If you think owning things in your own name keeps you in control, think again. In today's world, lawsuits, taxes, and predators are everywhere. That's why the smart money hides in plain sight. We help you to build legal firewalls, LLCs, land trusts, private contracts that protect your assets while keeping you invisible. Call Twain Consulting today at 310-997-2204. Find us on Facebook at Twain Consulting. That's facebook.com/Twain Consulting. Protect what you've built before someone else takes it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine being invisible to creditors, identity thieves, and lawsuits, protected and secure no matter what. Virtual invisibility uses proven business and legal strategy to shield your assets and your privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind, and that includes you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control today. Call 213-465-0639 or go to Facebook, facebook.com/Twain Consulting, and make yourself truly untouchable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. Trump demolishing the East Wing. This is sending a message that everyone should pay attention to. He said that Article 2 says that he can do whatever he wants. This is the statement of a child, a spoiled brat, lost child. And what you're looking at is Trump doing whatever he wants. There's no question that he hates America. There's no question that he despises the egalitarianism, the fraternity, the equality that it stands for. There's no question of this. This show has testified to incidences that show this continually. And there's just no question. No one should ever doubt it. But the message you should be getting from this is that when it comes time to choose someone else, like November 2026, or if we even get that far, 2028, he'll do whatever he can, whatever he wants, to make sure that he does not go out of power. You see, he's got a taste for it now. And it's one small step from demolishing the East Wing and the other illegal things that he's doing to killing millions of people, letting them die, letting them starve like now. You have a situation now where there's real potential that people won't get their food benefits from SNAP, which is the Nutritional Assistance Program. And the thing about this is that those benefits already exist. They've already been funded. But the illegitimate Trump administration refuses to pass them along. He's taking away their health care so that they will bleed, so that they will suffer. They will die, sometimes excruciating deaths. He appointed a heroin and cocaine addict, an admitted heroin and cocaine addict, RFK Jr., who also says he has a brain worm, to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. And what do you see? You have measles outbreaks. You first had this in among the Amish in Texas, or the Amish, potato. And now it is in that famous corner, it's called Four Corners, the corner of southwest Utah. I guess that's where they're very reactionary there. backwards. The Mormons are reactionary and backwards, generally speaking. These are the fundamentalist LDS, and they can be persuaded very easily that things like vaccines are evil. This is stunning. This is so well proven that vaccines work and effective that it's stunning. It's stunning that anyone should make this kind of an argument. The hundreds, literally hundreds of millions of people who have been saved because of vaccines. And yet you have this, and this is one of the reasons why I say Trump hates America. He wants you to die. He wants you to suffer. Never doubt it. And his emissary in this particular situation is RFK Jr., who, arguably is insane. So the FLDS, these are kind of fundamentalist Mormons. They believe in plural marriage. This area where this has happened, I talked about the one with the Amish in Texas. This is on the Arizona border between Colorado City, Arizona, and Hilldale, Utah, in Mojave County. Here we have a new measles epidemic, and you will recall that you need about a 95% vaccination rate in order to achieve so-called herd immunity. And there's a misunderstanding about herd immunity. You don't get herd immunity by letting the disease run wild. It's an adjunct to a priori 95% vaccination rate. That's where you get herd immunity comes from. You don't get herd immunity if you just let the disease run wild. You would only get you would get herd immunity after the disease run wild and killed all sorts of people and made all sorts of people disabled and suffer. If you got any herd immunity at all, you would only get it for the sake of argument, for that one version, the earliest version, the original version of the disease. And if the disease mutated, which we all know that they do, COVID, for example, people would get sick with that all over again because they have herd immunity, herd immunity from the original version and not from the mutations. So these places like this, the vaccination rate, it's far below 95%. It's like more like 80%. So the people are going to suffer. The states are stepping in certain cases, Massachusetts, California, for example, not only Massachusetts and California, to try to institute some sanity in this otherwise insane aspect of health and human services helmed by this person, RFK Jr., and appointed by Trump, who basically doesn't care and is okay if you die. Now, the Trump administration is forcing people who he and his ICE Gestapo flunkies are throwing out of the country to sue the federal government in order to get their rights. And that corrupt and illegal administration, I believe that. You've heard me talk about that on the show many times now. This is an illegal and illegitimate administration. They will win. And the reason they will win is because they will defend and they will sue them back if possible. If they lose at the trial level, they will appeal. And this is why the people will lose. Why? Because litigation costs money. And they are poor, these people. Their jobs and even their ability to work in the United States has been taken away from them. Unless they happen to be magically, legally cognoscenti, they would have no way to even fight, let alone be successful against such disgusting and such deplorable illegal actions by this administration, whose adherents are frightened little men and women, whistling for the graveyard of this Democratic Republic at midnight. They're following Trump because he shows them the way. He, in his own paranoia, his own delusion, his own madness, his own gnawing core pain, does those things, those destructive things. that no one else has ever dared to do. He shows the way for worse people who will come after him, but are now watching and gaming everything that he does so that next time they can do it better. And this is also a tactic by the Trump administration. Trump has always been incredibly litigious, and he will sue for any reason at all. And if you lose, he will appeal. That's his strategy. And he forces you to accept the settlement because otherwise you would spend tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees below the amount of money that you're actually owed. I had a colleague. We used to go to lunch. We used to talk about how we could stop the court system. And we had a plan of what we were going to do, but it was just all spitballing. It's not something that we would ever do. But this is one of the ways that the Trump administration is destroying the United States government by deluge. Sue on every point. Sue on every point of everything against people who have no money to fight. And so I ask you, you poor deluded souls who voted for Trump, you maggots who are worse than the deluded, but are the modern day iteration of what Lenin called useful idiots, who could always, that's why he referred to them as that, be counted on to do the rich's dirty work for them. Those who can always be counted on here in the United States to fall for the rube bait, the suckers, the credulous, the deluded, and I say actively work against their own self-interest, believing that somehow rich men and they have the same interest. So I ask you, if something isn't done, SNAP benefits will be lost, perhaps forever. And it's a violation since the money has already been spent. The funds are already there and they could be distributed, but this illegitimate, illegal administration refuses to do so. Ask yourselves, and many of you maggots, you're from taker states. And do you know what a taker state is? A taker state is a state that receives more from the federal government than they give. Is this who you want governing you? Are you okay with the food being taken out of your mouths? Literally, the food being taken out of your mouth. Are you okay with your Obamacare premiums to go up by perhaps as much as 50%? You're about to see that happen. Are you okay with your Medicare to be cut? Are you okay with tens of millions of people losing their insurance because of the cuts to Medicaid? And if you're okay with that, are you okay with it with regard to yourself? And the strain and the burden that is going to be put on hospitals and emergency rooms and insurance companies, because that's who you voted for. And let me tell you, forget all those highfalutin principles that administration and the hangers-on talk about as the reasons for doing that. The people you voted for, it's nothing like that. It is a fool's errand to attribute such high-minded, assuming for the sake of argument that they're wrong-headed ideals, to them. The reason they're doing it is greed, which is the reason why they're doing everything that they're doing. That's the only principle that's in operation here. And this is Politics by Jake. And that's all for now. Until the next edition of Politics by Jake, good night from Los Angeles, and good luck to those of you who are in the fight. The world is unraveling fast. Governments are weakening, markets are crashing, chaos is looming. You need more than hope. You need a plan. Collapse Protocol gives you the tools to protect your assets, secure your future, and survive the storm. Don't wait for the collapse to hit. Prepare now. Visit Twain Consulting at facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call 213-465-0639. Collapse Protocol, your shield when everything else fails. Are you tired of the noise and the spin? Do you want the real story behind the headlines? I'm Jake, and this is Politics by Jake, where I tell you what they won't. And now we're going even deeper. and I need your help to keep doing it. Join me on Patreon and support independent political analysis that doesn't pull punches. You'll get insider breakdowns, you'll get bonus clips, and first access to new content. So go to patreon.com/politics by Jake. That's patreon.com/politics by Jake. No filters, no fluff, just the truth. Let's do this together.